Green is not in studio because he is down doing the commentary for the
gallivanting around the world.
Yeah, he's doing the commentary.
Oh, no! Oh, mayhem!
Yes, that clip is from the Macau Grand Prix from a couple of years ago, and that is where Jonathan is. And that's been a pretty exciting thing. You know, that's part of the FIE Formula 3 now, so we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. But, of course, we're now about an hour and 10 minutes from the Brazilian Grand Prix. And, you know, Les, this is one of those iconic, really mainly because of Ayrton Senna, you know, it really is. Where he's from. And it's just one of those iconic races. And you know, has got all that emotion attached to it.
It is. I mean, the Brazilian population is passionate about motorsports. And I'll say he's got a lot to do with that. But it's amazing. This particular weekend is always special around Brazil when everybody converges for Formula One.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw, I retweeted this just a few minutes ago. Bruno Senna took Ayrton's car around the circuit, and just, you know, the crowd was just yelling, you know, Bruno or Senna as he went around the track, as Bruno drove around the track. So it was a pretty emotional moment, I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely. I cannot imagine what Bruno's going through, you know, driving his uncle's car in front of the home crowd. That's just something else. And Bruno's such a nice guy, too. I mean, a really humble guy.
Yeah, we met him here in Austin a couple times. So, well, this is the 20th round. Can you believe it? We're almost done. We're this and one more round, and the Formula One season it seems like it just started to me, but yeah, we're almost done.
Will it still seem that way when we add 14 more races?
I know.
I think it will.
Yeah, and this is our first show on SiriusXM since the United States Grand Prix, and man, it was a huge crowd here. It was pretty good racing, and in fact, a huge crowd. It was a sellout. It was the first time ever here in Austin.
Both Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, the Saturday and Sunday sold out. I mean, I knew it. I didn't know it was going to be a sellout, but I knew it was big. Friday afternoon, I looked up and went, this looks like a Saturday crowd. It was
packed.
Huge Friday crowd. And they haven't announced the numbers, but last year we had 265,000 over 3 days. And so it's got to be bigger than that. So I would, and that put us somewhere in the top 5 or so of all Grand Prix around the world here in Austin. So I would imagine that this is will be, probably maybe closer to 300,000. I don't know, but it was a huge weekend here in Austin.
One thing I'll say, and we're going to be able to share a little bit of it. We had so many great interviews during that weekend. We were not able to include everything in. And there are some things, there's some interviews that we got that are still extremely relevant to the remainder of the season or just the business going on. And so we're gonna share some of that with you if you missed out on our broadcast before, or even those. We've got even more content.
We interviewed, I don't know, most of the grid. We didn't get Mercedes and Ferrari.
Imagine
that. But yeah, we did. We got most everybody, and we got to interview. As far as I know, we may have been the only ones that weekend, but we got to interview Chase Carey, the CEO of Formula One. So we've got some clips from that we're going to play as well. But let's talk a little bit about Interlagos and Brazil. I saw some of the stats on the ESPN coverage this weekend that I wrote down. It's like, I didn't realize, but Brazil is the 5th largest country in the world with over 200 million people. We think of the United States at 330-ish or whatever,
right,
as being such a big coveted market. I know economically we're the coveted market, but I always think of us as huge, right? Well, I mean, I didn't realize Brazil was that big, so that's a big audience over there. And the interesting thing to me really about Brazil is the circuit itself. I mean, I've done some onboards. It's really fascinating, and it is one of the shortest. It's only 2.7 miles, and the lap, I mean, I know everybody watched qualifying probably, but if you didn't, we're going to talk about that as well. But the lap is only 67 seconds, and which, you think of the average Formula One circuit being, what, a minute and 40 seconds. Like here in Austin, that's about what we are. But 67 seconds, that's a quick lap. But I love the elevation change from turn 1 down through turn 5. That left hand, and then those S's right after that is a really cool circuit.
Well, we always talk about the start of the race. the first turn is really important. But in this one, honestly, it's the first 4 turns that really come into play. There's been a lot of crazy battles through that section on the starting laps. So don't think it's over in T1. And
Yeah. And also, it's just got a good straight because the cars get well over 200 miles an hour. I think probably guaranteed 210-ish, maybe a little more.
Very cool.
So you get a lot. And I haven't brought it up yet, but this is a good time because we have a really cool guest coming on the show here in about 20 minutes or so. We have Marc Priestley, who was, if you don't know the name, he was a former McLaren mechanic, and he was kind of in one of those golden eras. I think it was like 2000 through, let me look at my notes, but 2000 to like 2009. And really, if you think about the people that he was in the sport with and on the team with, I mean, it's a really fascinating. And one great thing about is Mark being on the show today is that he was at that Interlagos race in 2008 when the championship was literally up for grabs the last 3 corners for the whole season, where Felipe Massa won the race and thought he won the championship because Lewis Hamilton had to finish 5th or higher to win the championship, and Lewis Hamilton was running around the track in 6th with like 3 corners to go, 4 corners to go.
Yeah.
And then Timo Glock ended up slowing down. And it's a really fascinating story. If you don't know that one, you need to Google it up or YouTube it up because it's really a fascinating story. It's probably one of the most iconic championship wins in Formula One history. So, and he was there, and so we'll talk to him about that. But yeah, Marc Priestley is going to join us at the bottom of the hour here in the pre-show. And like Les said, we got lots of interviews. We got Mark coming on here in a bit. And then, of course, the race itself starts in right about an hour from now, right here on the same channel 211, Sirius XM, and that'll be the BBC broadcast as usual, play-by-play of that. And then, of course, we're going to have our 1-hour post-show to follow that up. But yeah, let's talk some more about the Brazilian Grand Prix, Interlagos, and, in fact, you know what? I think I want to play a clip here. We have a clip of Sebastian Vettel. And Sebastian, it's just a little intro to the track and Ferrari. This is something we got from Ferrari, but let's play this from Sebastian Vettel. In fact, I want to set this up a little bit because they talk about what they've done in the season so far, and obviously it's been a little bit back and forth of late. We thought at one point in the season, I really thought Charles Leclerc was just going to
clean house,
but Vettel's looked pretty good, including qualifying yesterday. So let's go ahead and play this clip.
Racing in Brazil, Sao Paulo, I think in a nutshell, anything can happen. I don't know why, but there's something about Sao Paulo. Every year there's something crazy happening. And if it's not, then for sure you've got to guarantee that the next year something will be happening. Again, it's been a good place for us. Been treating us well the last couple of years. I think we had good speed there. Kimi was on the podium last year. I think 2 years ago we won the race. I think overall it's been a good track, a good hunting ground for us, and hopefully it will be like that when we come back. Certainly in terms of atmosphere, it's very special. Brazilians are, I think, one of the loudest crowds in the calendar, and you can nearly hear them. You can definitely feel them inside the car.
I can believe that, yeah.
Yeah, he was hanging out in a cool.
Yeah, that was Ferrari music. But yeah, I like the fact that they talk about anything can happen. Now, they say that, but it is a good place to start on the front row. I think that that's not unusual for the front row guys to win this race. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about where I'm going to look at, let's look at qualifying, and let's look at and all the things that happen and where everybody's going to start, because Max Verstappen on pole, only his second pole, I believe, which is really weird to say, isn't it?
As much as we've seen him up front, that really was a surprise to me because I hadn't counted his, and I expected that would be higher. Look at all his results.
I know. I was really amazed that was only his second pole. So Max Verstappen, let's go ahead and run down the grid. So we got Max Verstappen, Sebastian Vettel, and also in the front row. Then Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, Valtteri Bottas, Albon up in 6th, Pierre Gasly, Roman Grosjean, Kimi Räikkönen, Kevin Magnussen, round out the top 10. How about those Haas boys?
Yeah.
I
That's where we
mean,
want them, and that's where we expect them. And as we spoke to them here, they're already looking towards 2020 on things, but they're going to not give up on this season either.
well, you say that's where we expect them. I know that we as Americans, that's where we want our race drivers to be and our team to be. But this season, I have no idea what to expect. I mean, really, if you go through the whole year, qualifying, this is not that unusual, although it's been many races since they both qualified. They both made it into Q3, so and qualified in the top 10. So, but that was cool, and I really don't know. No pun intended. Cool temperature, tire windows. I mean, that's been the Haas problem all season long, and we've got some. In fact, we got some clips. I'll probably play one here in a sec from Gunther Steiner because they talk about he when we interviewed him last race here in Austin, he talked all about that window, but yeah,
Well,
we don't know what to expect today with them.
one of the things that has come out is this course is really difficult to manage your tire temperatures because the extreme speed, opposite ends of the speed. You got that longer straightaway. You've got some slow curves and things like that. So it's a lot of quite a variety, if you will, in speed, and that makes it more difficult to maintain the tire temperatures to any consistency, and certainly within the windows. And so that's one thing that we've already seen coming up is that the short course also complicates matters on it. So we should, I think tires are going to come into play more so than we've seen recently.
Yeah, and it is going to be. That's a good point about this track. But before let's just run down the rest of the top 10 on the starting grid. So Lando Norris in 11th. It's a good spot to be in choice of tires there. And Daniel Ricciardo, Antonio Giovinazzi, Nico Hulkenberg in 14th. Sergio Perez, Daniel Kvyat, who did not have a great day yesterday. He really struggled. And we got to hang out with Daniel Kvyat quite a bit.
Oh, tell that story.
Well,
was cool.
let me finish this. But
All right,
Lance
after
Stroll,
grid.
17, George Russell, 18, Kubica, 19, and Carlos Sainz, who really had a double whammy of a weekend because not only did he have his car just stop and in Q1, so he didn't really even get to qualify. But now he's taking a power unit, so he is completely. He's probably going to have to start in the parking lot. So
Yeah, he might
so
be
Carlos
directing
Sainz,
traffic early.
Yeah. But you know what? Let's go back to the Haas team, and I want to play this clip from Gunther Steiner because he talks. This was our interview with him, what we did here in Austin a couple weeks ago, and he talks about the 2019 technical issue.
The tires for sure are an issue, but they're created by our car more than other cars create a problem. Basically, the tires, they moved the window of operation, the temperature window, they decreased it this year. And we were out of the window, but we didn't realize why we were out of the window, So after a while, we realized that aerodynamically we are not where we thought we are with downforce and the balance of the downforce. So, and until we realized that summer break was almost there, because that is why we put the old car back, I call it the old car, it's the Melbourne spec car, back on the track to compare the developments, and the developments didn't make any difference. We put a lot of developments on, more than any other year before, but they didn't have the result which we expected from the wind tunnel. So we realized that we went wrong with the development, and then you're halfway through the season, then you try to do things, but the only thing at that stage you can find out what you actually did wrong, because you haven't got the time to fix it for the rest of the season.
It was mostly aero. It wasn't like suspension design, but
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the suspension or with the chassis or anything. It's just aero.
Yep, that narrow little window that I've heard lots of the teams talk about, but that narrow temperature window that the tires have,
Right.
that if they can't get the car to operate the tires in that temperature, then literally the wheels come off. So that's what's been going on with Haas all year, and they haven't been able to get it right. They had those, obviously they've had the windows of temperature control in qualifying where they can set the car up with, just the right amount of fuel, and they know the temperature that's going to be for that lap.
Right.
So it's just when you get into a race situation, everything is just falls apart.
Well, and it's interesting that he's also contributing some of it to the aero that's involved. That's a management facet that a lot of people don't realize ties into the tire temperatures.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what he's saying. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and take our first break, and when we come back, we'll continue to break down the Brazilian Grand Prix. We're about an hour out, And we're about 15 minutes out from our guest, Marc Priestley. You're listening to Speed City live from Austin, Texas. Back after these messages.
Hello, I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, welcome back. We are getting ready for the Brazilian Grand Prix live here in Austin, and we talked about qualifying, but I'm going to run down the starting grid because we've had some changes, obviously, we talked about Carlos Sainz and his troubles, but Charles Leclerc also, finished fourth fastest, but is not going to be starting fourth. In fact, let's go ahead and run down the full starting grid because of all these changes. So Max Verstappen, who did win pole, will start at the front of the grid, but then Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton in third, Valtteri Bottas in fourth, Albon in fifth, Pierre Gasly in sixth, Grosjean starting seventh for the Haas team. That's nice. Kimi Räikkönen in eighth, Kevin Magnussen, the Haas driver, at ninth, Lando Norris in 10th, Daniel Ricciardo in 11th, and Antonio Giovinazzi 12th, Hulkenberg 13th, Charles Leclerc 14th. So that'll be one of the interesting things to watch during the race, to see a crazy fast driver in a crazy fast car coming up through the grids. So
I think that's, I think we're going to see the same thing we did with Max a few races ago when he started out back. It was, folks are going to step aside and he's going to go zipping by and get back up into the crowd where he's more competitive.
Not everyone will step aside.
No, not
Kevin Magnussen will not step aside.
Yeah.
We'll put it to you that way.
That will not happen.
That will not happen. Well, let's play a couple of more clips that we've got because we have some really great ones that I don't want to miss out on. And I think let's go ahead and play one more Gunther Steiner clip because one of the big stories that was out of Austin was the 2021 rules. And I think that that Gunther had a pretty good take on the 2021 rules. This is just less than a minute clip, but let's hear Gunther Steiner in talking about the 2021 rules.
The compromise is pretty good. I mean, and I think I was the most outspoken about calling it GP1. You know, we don't need to go GP1 racing because I'm fully there with you. Formula One needs the DNA of Formula One is technology. We've got a lot of fans which watch us. We create stories. We do developments because there's a lot of spec series which there is great racing, but there's no story. And I think they find a good compromise to close the rules a little bit. That in theory the playing field should get a little bit more level, but still don't stop technology, don't stop technological advances, because that is the key of the sport, in my opinion. You know, otherwise it's just another race series, GP1.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
right.
The question was, how's technology? You know, is it in jeopardy? Are we gonna move backwards and not focus on technology? But
well, they've come up with some different ways. Some of it, like the NGH, is going to be made of commonly available materials. No proprietary materials can be used in their construction, and that was something because the big money manufacturers and teams would really come up with kind of their own recipe and componentry that's involved with that. So that's one thing. The other is the fuel. They're starting to drive regulations further into the fuel. The fuels must be 20% renewable resources such as biofuels. And so they're driving that. There are a lot of changes. I think it's, in those cases, it's going to force technology to be generally readily available. You have to improve it. It has to be available essentially to other teams for the most part, that you're not getting an upper hand because you have a big chemical research team developing your fuel. So I think that's the biggest part of it.
Well, yeah, I think that, and some of the big things coming out of the 2021 is the cap, the $175 million cap that is, and we're going to dig into this a little bit in the next couple shows here, but the $175 million cap that caps not all of the spending, and then of course the new car. I love the look of the new car, by the way. I think that, and there's nothing wrong with having the car look really cool, with the larger wheels and tires.
Yeah, I want to jump back to that cap because there is one item there, or two items actually. So marketing and driver salaries are not included in the team cap.
Yeah,
and that's really important to call out. The other is that some of the production time for the development of components for the vehicle is not included. We asked Gunther about what is defined, what is going to be part of research and development, how will it be controlled if you're the manufacturer and you can spend it developing Tony Stewart's favorite car, the Prius. And what if we developed it in the streetcar side of things and then took that technology that we spent the budget over in that other sandbox and brought it to our team?
Mm-hmm.
So there are some things that rightly need to be defined. How can you use somebody else's technology that was developed, even if it's your own company, parent company, Mercedes? Can they use the streetcar technology budget that they're going to spend, and it's bigger and it's unlimited, and then bring it into your F1 team? So
yeah,
where there are rules, they will be broken.
Yeah. Well, I have another clip of Gunther we're going to play here in just a second, but if you want to call and join the conversation, we'd love to have callers. We've had callers from I don't know how many states across the United States this year. It's been a good season, but the number's 512-643-LIVE, 512-643-5483. And don't forget, Marc Priestley, if you don't know Marc, he's a fantastic F1 resource, former mechanic for the McLaren F1 team, a championship mechanic. I mean, that's a heck of a thing to have on your resume, but I'm sure he'd love to take a call. So 512-643-5483.
The others, you can watch us on the Facebook feed. We're live there as well.
Did you just say the Facebook feed?
Just do it without the. Yeah. Okay, thanks. So,
hey, let's play a clip from Gunther that was talking about what you're just talking about and how they are going to be able to compete in the coming years with the big teams.
still the big teams will still have an advantage. They've got so much more resources, and next year the resources are not capped or anything to develop the 21 car, which is the new spec car. So always there is an opportunity, but the opportunity is there for everybody, and it's very competitive here. So we try to get an opportunity, but what we need to do for 21, not to get it wrong. That is the biggest thing. I wouldn't say we take big risks to get it right, to be different or complete something crazy, but be solid and get out there. That again, with the new regulation, we have a solid car and we develop on that one, like we did, for example, in 17. There was a new regulation, 17, and then we bettered that car, and then we had a pretty good car in 18. So maybe 21 is a year where we are a little bit, I wouldn't say conservative, but not take any big risk, and then just get something solid so you don't have to back pedal if you get it wrong.
Yeah, we all want to know that when we turn on the TV or when we arrive at the circuit, we don't know who's going to win on Thursday. We don't want to know who's going to win. And I love the fact that everyone is so focused on this. But again, we don't want our technology, we don't want our sport to be diluted. We don't want, we want Formula One to stay the same, but we want it to be different. So it's a very challenging thing. And you know what? I've got one more clip that I want to play too, because we got to sit down with Chase Carey, the Formula One CEO, chairman, executive vice chairman and CEO or something like that. But he's the
Godfather.
man. He's the man. And we got to sit down with him here in Austin. And we got to talk to him about the 2021 rules because they had just been announced about an hour and a half before this interview. So let's play Chase Carey on the 2021 rules.
We're very excited. I mean, we've been working on this for a while. Probably it's been a work in process for, realistically, probably a couple of years. So it's nice to get this step. And obviously, we got a lot of work left to do. We got to now make it happen. And these rules are not, like we're done. So it's an ongoing process. But these are a very important step, and I think really the foundation for us, enabling us to make the sport everything we want it to be in terms of competition, action on the track, and a much healthier sport for everybody.
Technology fans, do we have anything to worry about? We love the fact that F1 is the pinnacle. Do we have any concerns there?
No, and I think that's why we tried to address it right up front, that I think the DNA of Formula One, is critical to its future. I mean, this is a great sport with a great history, great heroes, great events, and we want to build on that. We don't want to change it. We want to build on it. And part of that is making sure we continue to have a sport that is first a great sport with great competition on the track, but is a sport married to technology. And it is what distinguishes the sport from almost every other sport out there, and I think part of what makes it truly unique.
Yeah, that was Chase Carey, CEO of Formula One, and obviously that's what their concern is making the sport more competitive, but again, without diluting what we love about our sport.
Well, and they're able to do it with a couple of different approaches. I mean, it quite honestly is one of the things that they're doing is limiting how much wind tunnel time that is involved, and so that helps us, the smaller teams, actually, because big wind tunnels are expensive, and so they're going to limit some of that information that's going out. One of the things, there's no gear changes planned on in the immediate future. I mean, like all the way to 2025, the gearboxes are looking like they're going to stabilize and stay. So, you may say, well, wait a minute, did that just, jeopardize something? No, it really didn't. I mean, the gearboxes that are here are fine. That is not the issue. An individual team may have an issue, but it is not the issue. And it's one of those, is there any reason to drive improvement in it? Well, there always is, but with what they're focusing on, you don't have to re-engineer a gearbox to a new spec and invest all of that. So that's a good budgetary call to say, this is working, let's leave it and not focus research money on that.
Yep, I like it. Well, we've got some more clips from our interview with Chase Carey, but we're going to go and take a break. We're now about 40 minutes from the Brazilian Grand Prix at Interlagos. So you're listening to Speed City. We're live in Austin, Texas. Back after these messages.
Hi, I'm Mike Brewer from Wheeler Dealers on Velocity Channel, and this is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, welcome back to the show. We are just a few minutes, about 37 minutes from the Brazilian Grand Prix Formula One. Really excited about this one, man. I love the circuit. I love the energy, and I love the history with Senna. I mean, it's just one of those races that you got.
And the audience is into it.
Exactly.
That is what I love. The audience is so far into it.
Man, the crowd just goes crazy there. But we have a gentleman on the phone. We have calling in on Skype, and he knows all about this, firsthand knowledge. I want to welcome to the show Marc Priestley. Marc, welcome to Speed City.
Hi, guys. Nice to talk to you.
Great to talk to you too.
Welcome, buddy. This is going to be great. Sorry, I keep interrupting because I'm excited now.
Yeah, well, we are excited to have you, Marc, because, we've been to several Grand Prix here in Austin now, and we've been to a few Grand Prix around the world, but having someone with your experience as a former race mechanic for a championship winning team at McLaren and being around the sport probably your entire life, we're so excited to have you.
Oh, excuse me, that's my dogs in the background.
I know those dogs from your YouTube channel.
There you go.
It seems appropriate to have them.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, I mean, thanks very much. That's a lovely intro. And it has been an amazing opportunity and set of experiences that I've had. It was always a dream of mine to be able to be part of a Formula One team, and specifically to be part of a Formula One pit stop. And I managed to achieve that. And fortunately for me, that opportunity came with one of the most successful teams in the history of the sport. And in doing so, I managed to live through some amazing times. Of course, the period that I was with McLaren was one of their most successful periods, of course, with success from people like Mika Hakkinen and David Coulthard right through the eras of Kimi Räikkönen and Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton. So I was very, very lucky. But it was a brilliant set of experiences, I'll say.
And not to mention Ron Dennis and Adrian Newey. I mean, the people that you got to work with and around. I mean, it's just really, it's amazing. But why don't we have to talk about 2008 because we touched on it earlier in the show, but I can't do it justice. Give us, so for those who haven't seen it or know about it, give us some background.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it goes down as possibly one of the greatest finishes to a championship, certainly in modern history. Of course, for those who don't know, Lewis, who was working with us at McLaren at the time back in 2008, had only been in the sport for 2 years. His teammate was Fernando Alonso, and the championship was neck and neck all the way through the season, right through to the final day. And that final day came at Interlagos in Brazil. And, to put it in a very short, to sort of try and close it down into a very short sentence, the championship was decided pretty much on the last corner of the last lap of the last race of the season in the most dramatic fashion. And, I was there that day. I was inside the garage, part of the pit stop crew that day. And the pressure was obviously immense. But once we'd got through the final pit stop and it was now just down to the closing laps of the Grand Prix, I mean, the sort of term emotional roller coaster is much overused in sport, but I can't think of any better way to describe it because over those last few laps, as the rain started to fall and then started to dry up again, it looked like we might have a chance, and then it looked like that chance was gone away as Lewis started to struggle on the tyres, and then just, as we all know now, in the closing moments, there was Timo Glock still struggling on a set of dry tyres on a very wet circuit, struggling for grip, and he was holding that sort of magical 5th place, which is all that Lewis needed on that day to secure the championship. And as I say, a corner from the end, we managed to get past him, and it was just the most amazing feeling because you can't overstate how difficult it is to win a Formula One World Championship. It takes a huge amount of effort from so many people and over such a long period of time, and for it all to come down to that moment was just incredible. So the relief and the celebrations were immense. But I still think today it goes down as just a great sporting moment.
Yeah, not just a great Formula One moment, but a great sporting moment. I mean, it really, it's so rare. I mean, and watching the Ferrari garage and they're thinking they've won the championship, not only won the race, won the championship.
Right.
And it was just one of those epic moments, just really, really amazing.
I have to have an awful lot of sympathy for those guys because I've kind of been there as well. I mean, only the year before at the final race of the season, we were in that similar position where we could have won the championship, probably should have won the championship with either of our two drivers, and we lost out to Ferrari on the final day. So, I also know what it's like to lose it in those last dying moments, and it's heartbreaking. So I did have to feel terribly sorry for those guys, but it's difficult not to get caught up in the emotion of winning in that situation.
Yeah, I know you guys were in that opposite position. So, well, I want to talk more about the race today. I want to talk about the race, Interlagos, the circuit itself. And, you've been there so many times, and with your insights, can you kind of give us a preview of what to look for today?
Yeah, it's a great track. It's one of the proper good old school tracks. And what makes it so good is that it's first of all, it's one of those circuits that, doesn't have acres and acres of kind of tarmac runoff. So if you make a mistake here, you're generally onto some grass and then you're into a barrier. So it punishes mistakes is the first thing, which I love. But the second thing, it has a huge amount of sort of undulation around the circuit. So the track goes up and down, I mean, much more so than it appears on TV. I think it's 43 meters of elevation between the lowest and the highest point, which is a huge amount. I mean, if you ever, I've run around this track a number of times, and it's a short lap, but it's one of the hardest tracks to run around because of the climbs you have to make up and down the hills. It also has cambers on different corners that, throw the balance of the car in perhaps slightly different ways than you might imagine on a flat circuit. So it has a little bit of everything. And then looking ahead to today's race, I mean, I think one of the features of this circuit is that because it's such a short lap, we don't get, like we do on some circuits, this huge train of cars spaced out where the leaders start, have to find a huge window, just push at the beginning of the race to find a huge window to be able to drop into after a pit stop because there's so much space. What happens here typically is that because it's a short lap, nobody really extends that lead too much, and you very quickly come up against traffic in the leaders. So the whole track tends to be full of cars, which means there are less windows or less gaps on the circuit to drop into, which makes the strategy a little bit more tricky to plan out. It also means that, if you are a leader and you're pushing, trying to build some kind of gap, you have to negotiate back markers pretty early on in the race. So there's definitely all of those kind of things that just throw a little spanner into the works. It doesn't make it straightforward for the guy leading the race to control it like they might normally would. We've also got the slight change today from the rest of the weekend where temperatures are a lot higher. And that will be significant because, of course, Friday's running in practice was generally wet, or at least was very cool in conditions. Free practice 3 yesterday was also much cooler. Today's going to be a lot hotter, and that's really going to affect how the tyres work. It'll help some people, but it will also mean that other people will struggle with what we call thermal degradation, where the tyres will start to overheat by the end of a lap. So there's going to be some management to take place there. And I think there's a lot of, it could be quite easy to look from the outside at this race and say, well, look, the championship's done and dusted. We've already got a winner. Is there anything still to play for? I mean, there absolutely is. I mean, first of all, we've got Verstappen on pole. That's not a familiar position to him this year. Yeah. They are desperately looking for to get some more great results for them and for Honda. And of course, everything that everybody does in these next 2 races is all valuable for next year because the regulations stay very stable for next year. So we're going to see teams trying things. We're going to see Mercedes trying things, experimenting with, not only parts, but setup and strategies, and trying to work out with the freedom they now have, whether they could perhaps gamble on something that might pay off. And if it doesn't, perhaps it's not the end of the world. So I think there's loads to look forward to today, and a lot of unknowns that we find it very difficult to predict as yet.
I know. We think about the season, the championship wrapped up and everything, and we think, what's going to happen here? But also the fact that there's so little testing time in Formula One too. Any time on track is valuable, much less in a race environment. I mean, they've got to just relish being able to get that data.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's perhaps, as I say, even more important this time out because this will be, this race and then the final race in Abu Dhabi in a couple of weeks. They're the final two opportunities to put your car on a racetrack before February when we start, we start preseason testing again. And as I say, we've got this slightly unusual situation where nothing much changes in the regulations between this season and next season. So everything we can do, every lap we can do, every bit of data we can generate is valuable for next year. When it comes to this time next year, and of course we're on the brink of 2021, like you were just discussing, of course it won't be like that. It'll be very different where we're going into a brand new season of completely different regulations. So this is a sort of slightly unique year where everything they do now almost just continues over to next year.
I want to ask you about the elevation at Interlagos because, we had Mexico City and it's dramatic, but I always try to remember exactly how turbocharging affects atmosphere but you being engineer, you can probably explain this 1,000 times better than I can even try to think of it. But talk about and it's not that much here, but it's just a little over 2,000 feet, like 700 meters.
That's right. It's still significant, not Mexico City levels, but still enough to have an impact. And essentially, in very basic terms, the air is thinner at that altitude, so there are less air molecules in a given volume of atmosphere, if you like. So that means that we use each of those air molecules for things like cooling the engine, cooling the brakes, cooling the tires. So there are less air molecules that we're driving through to be able to take that cooling effect from. So that's the first thing. So cooling certainly becomes an issue. We also use those air molecules to generate downforce. So the wings, push through those air molecules as they're driving around, and they convert that into a downwards force. That's what downforce is. It pushes the car into the racetrack. So again, given that there are less air molecules in the given space, we can produce less downforce. So we've got slightly, bigger wings or a higher downforce package on the car in terms of our wing package, our floors, our bodywork, and yet we're gaining less downforce than we would do with the same package at a more regular circuit. So that's the second thing. So we've got less downforce available. And then the final thing, I guess, is like you're talking about the engines, particularly the turbos. These engines need a certain amount of air being forced into them to be able to generate the power. So that means that the turbos at this altitude have to work even harder because the engine still needs the same amount of air. Well, if there's less air out there, we have to squeeze more in with the turbo running even harder, even faster. So that puts an awful lot of duty cycle on those turbos, which are already spinning at well over 100,000 RPM in normal conditions. So they're already working hard, anyway. Now we have to see them working even harder. So the teams that have the most efficient and the most effective turbos tend to be the ones who excel here. And it looks, from what we've seen so far, like Honda particularly might be doing a really good job in that area, given that they don't seem to be losing out in the power sections of this circuit. I mean, this is a power-dominated track. You might not think so, but there's a huge part of this circuit where it's pretty flat out, the final sector, pretty flat out. It's uphill as well. And so you're relying on a power unit to deliver, all the power you can get from it. And Honda have stuck it on pole. And if you look at the speed traces, are doing incredibly well up against the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari. So that might suggest that Honda are doing a really good job in the turbo area of that power unit. So it also means they're all working a lot harder, and that means they're under a bit more stress. So we may well see that we might get failures at some point over the course of this race as well.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated by the turbo side of it too, because like you said, it could be, Mercedes is obviously the last few years, the technology that they've had has just been phenomenal. But what if this one little area of the Honda power unit, what if their turbo is, a microgram lighter, or their lubrication or the way it spins is slightly better and gives them that advantage. But and I'm going to go a little bit off in the weeds just a little further. You talk about how it has to work harder, but just the nature of a turbo being driven by exhaust gases, but then that's affected by the atmosphere. But so do we think that, can you talk a little bit deeper about how the turbo itself has to work harder and how that affects the being driven by the engine?
Well, it's much more about how effective it is. So, everything runs to a certain level of efficiency. So if a turbo is spinning at 100,000 RPM, let's say as a given figure, how much air or combustion charge is that forcing into the engine at 100,000 RPM? Well, if one is slightly more efficient than another, it's going to force more air into the system. Well, because we're at an atmosphere where we've got less air anyway, the more effective or the more efficient your turbo is, you're going to lose out to the way you would perhaps on a normal circuit, but you're still, if you're more effective, getting more in than one of your rivals might be. And like you say, it could be talking about tiny amounts. And don't forget, of course, these turbos are assisted or certainly spun up through the MGU-H part of the hybrid system. And so all of that plays a part, and it's about the efficiency of all of those different pieces. And as you say, we're talking about such small amounts, but it only has to be a fraction of a percentage to make a difference. And all of these top power unit manufacturers are at such a close level now, given that we've gone for a few years of this hybrid era of Formula One, that we're now searching for the tiniest advantages. In the beginning, Mercedes maybe had a huge advantage over everybody. Well, that's now closed right up. So a tiny fraction more effective, or sorry, more efficient rather, in that turbo can actually translate, particularly at a high altitude circuit, into a reasonably significant, and when I say that, I mean, I'm talking still about small amounts, but significant over the other manufacturers in terms of its performance. So it's much more about efficiency, much more than about, how big it is or how much it can force in, but how efficient it is given its given speed, for example.
Mark, I got to ask you a question. So you mentioned the turbo from Mercedes going on. Mercedes changed the configuration a couple of years ago, and it seemed like it was discussed every other time somebody brought up turbos that Mercedes separated the compressor from the impeller, but then that kind of faded away. Did they keep that configuration? Did they move away from it? Is anybody else doing that you know of?
I'm not sure what this year. I'm pretty sure they are still doing it. And the reasons behind the splitting the two parts of the turbo were sound reasons. It was partly about cooling, so keeping the sort of compressor side away from the hot exhaust gases, if you like. There was certainly that side of things. There was the idea of packaging as well, of course, because that's really important in terms of aero. So how big or bulky your turbo is on the top of your engine, that actually has a big impact on how you can shape the bodywork around it. So if they can find a way of making it smaller or packaging it in a more neat way, it can really appease the aerodynamicists in the team. So that was the reason for doing it. I mean, others chose not to do that. I think, as far as I know, and of course it's one of the most closely guarded secrets in Formula One, is the absolute details of everybody's power unit. But as far as I know, that's still the way that they do it at Mercedes. Yeah.
Wow.
And that when we first heard about that years ago, the splitting, it was like,
Uh-huh.
duh, why didn't somebody think of that 100, when the turbo was invented, you know?
Well, it was actually used on a truck, and I forget how many decades back that it was on an industrial truck engine.
Is that right? Okay.
Used just briefly and went away. I think it was the complexity of manufacturing over the benefits of it.
Well, Mark, as you can
that,
tell,
of course, that doesn't matter in Formula One. The complexity of manufacturing is not an issue.
or the cost.
In fact, that seems to be bragging points.
Yeah.
Well,
Mark, we, as you can tell, we're both geek nerds, and this, to me, I would rather talk to a Formula One engineer than a race driver. I'll say it right now here in but so it's exciting for us. But this is one of the most frustrating parts of being a nerd, is that we don't get to know, not even guys that have been in the sport, and now that you're out of the sport, we don't know. And that's what really, I want to know every technical detail of what goes on in these engines.
We need a bigger beer budget to take these guys out when they're here in Austin.
Yeah. Well, it's like a great big game, isn't it? Where, I mean, it was the same when I was inside the team. I was, fighting hard to keep people like me now away from the car. So it's this big game of cat and mouse, where the team are trying to protect their IP, and everybody outside, the media, are desperately trying to see it and trying to get photos of it. And so it's this. I find it quite amusing that I've almost switched sides in that sense, in that now I'm desperately looking for the answers to all these technical secrets. A few years ago, I was desperately trying to protect them.
I can see you walking up to the McLaren garage, and they're going, "Hey, great to see you, but stand back here."
Yeah, stay over here.
Yeah.
Mark, can you stick with us through a commercial break? We got to take a break.
Sure. Yeah,
All
no
right,
problem.
We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We're with Marc Priestley, and we'll be back after these messages.
Hi guys, this is Pierre Gasly and you're listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
Pierre Gasly bringing us back. Man, he was a nice guy. We got to spend time with both Pierre Gasly and Daniel Kvyat, and they were both just super nice. Daniel didn't even know who we were, and we're waiting in the breakfast line at the hotel. Really nice guy. But all right, well, we're excited. We still have Marc Priestley on the line, and Marc, I want to give a little more background about Marc, because not only was he a mechanic for the championship-winning McLaren era.
Yeah, there was that.
But he's got a YouTube channel that I do not miss every single video. Marc, I will say it. I saw the very first one, and I've watched every one since then.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did. I love them. And they're the dogs. See, that's perfect.
Yeah.
If you watch,
he's got his own entourage.
And but you've also done you did a lot of the Formula E commentary for Sky, and you've done Formula One, and but you've also got a new television show coming out with Mark Brewer, right?
Yeah, that's right. Mike Brewer from Wheeler Dealers. So we've done our own version, a UK version of Wheeler Dealers. So Wheeler Dealers is filmed currently in the States, huge on the Motor Trend or Discovery Network, I think, Motor Trend out there, I think it is. But it's a huge global TV network, and they wanted a UK spin-off version of the show. So we've actually filmed it all now, so it's just in the edit right now. I think it's launched or on the screens in January. It'll be available over there too on Motor Trend. And it's essentially it's me going back to the engineering, the hands-on engineering of cars, which is, of course, where it started for me, and that's why I fell in love with Formula One in the first place, was because I love cars. So it's actually been really nice for me to get my hands dirty again, because it's actually been quite a few years since I've done that. So it's been great fun, and I'm really looking forward to it coming out.
And it's called Dream Cars, and the premise is, I forgot, where you take some older cars, like I saw you're going to take a DeLorean and do some things with them?
Yeah, so we have each episode has a punter, if you like, come along with a car that they don't necessarily want, but they have a dream car in mind that perhaps they can't afford, or they don't, there's no way for them to achieve that. And then Mike and I, using both of our sets of skills, so he's a car trader, so he's very good at wheeler dealing, and me with my engineering skills, we managed to sort of trade up through a series of different cars, adding value to them, finding ways to essentially make money until we can afford to buy the dream car for the customer. So it's actually a really nice process as well, because we end up handing over somebody's dream car, and the reaction to that, of course, is just brilliant. We are literally realizing people's dreams for them, which is a lovely experience.
Well, I know that the idea, you take a car and you fix it up and you increase the value. I have a suggestion on the DeLorean, and that is take that dreadful Renault 6-cylinder out and drop and how about
LS motor.
Exactly. Drop an LSV8.
I know where you're going.
Yeah, you're not the first to say that.
Yeah. Good fight. Well, here's another one. You could potentially come and go ahead and do an American version of your new show and help me get my 911 air-cooled 74 RSR wide body. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that would be one of my dream cars too. I love the old classic 911s.
All right, Mark, I got to ask. We always ask our drivers. We've got one question we always ask, so John, go for it.
Well, it's funny. We've started this show back in 2012, and our very first guests were Connor Daly and Alexander Rossi. And we started this question. We're just gearheads like you, and we just said, well, what do you drive every day? So we want to know, what do you drive every day, Mark?
Well, unfortunately, I've got a rubbish answer for this, only because, I've got a big family and 2 dogs, as you know. So I had a Mercedes E-Class estate, which about a month ago or 2 months ago now, I crashed. And it's been written off. But the story is that I actually crashed it into a Rolls Royce. So I crashed it into the side of a Rolls Royce Dawn convertible, and my car was destroyed. Luckily everybody was fine, nobody was hurt. But I've just been, the insurance has just been sort of sorted out. So I'm now just about to start looking for a new car. So I'm in between cars is the answer to that question.
How about your insurance when you call them and tell them you ran into a Rolls Royce?
Well, luckily it wasn't my fault.
Okay.
I'm okay on that front.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, man.
Well,
okay,
hey, look,
now wait a minute. Tell him what Alexander Rossi drove.
Yeah, Connor Daly, when he came on, he said, I got my Subaru WRX. It's all souped up, turbos, blah, blah. But then Alexander Rossi came on and he paused and really embarrassed, just like he goes, well, I drive a Chevy pickup. So that's what. So you weren't. You're not the worst answer.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of with all my connections through Formula E that I also work on now. I am very tempted to go fully electric. So I'm just looking at the various options on that front. But it's quite an exciting time for the I'd love a Taycan. Come on, who wouldn't?
918's hard to put a booster seat or anything in with the kids.
It's a really exciting time for the automotive industry because things are changing so rapidly, and of course for someone who's fascinated by technology like I am, I just think it's a great time to be involved in it. So I'm kind of really excited to see what comes next because it's changing so fast.
I know, but it's such a decision right now. It's like, what kind of car do you, if you can afford a 918 or a Taycan, great. But in between, there's lots of options. I test drove a Tesla Model 3S or Model 3 Performance, Model 3 Performance, and the acceleration is just mind blowing, just insane. But then it doesn't have the sound and the soul of everything else. I don't know what
if I could get one message to Elon Musk, give us a cool looking 100% electric car. I'm just not jazzed yet by any of his designs.
Well, what's the new one that's coming out? That's 0 to 60 in 1.9, whatever that one's going to be.
Okay, but that's stats. That I'm still not there with a cool car.
It's another coupe. It's another.
I know it.
Well, Mark, we are now about 5 minutes away from the race, and like we started the show with, Brazil is just Interlagos, just one of those amazing circuits. So we got to ask you, what's going through the mind of the guys in the garage right now, since you've been there?
Yeah, you're thinking at this point, you're sort of rushing through your mind as to making sure that you've done everything that you thought you had to do. You're desperately running through a checklist. You're questioning yourself because nerves all set in at this point. So you all start to question yourself. Did I do this? Did I do it properly? But ultimately, they're all, highly skilled, really professional people. They will have done it all properly, and I think we're in for an exciting race. For me, the really interesting point about this race is that I think it's going to be pushed towards a one-stop strategy, partly because of, like I said, there's not going to be too many gaps on the circuit to drop into, and it's a long pit lane as well here, so pit stops come at a bit of a premium. So I think it'll edge towards a one-stopper. And Verstappen and Albon, Verstappen, of course, on pole position, doesn't have any brand new hard tyres. Now, a one-stop strategy is highly likely to feature the harder tyre in that second stint. They're the only teams out the top teams that don't have a brand new set of hards. So I think that's an interesting one to keep an eye on. Could they be forced into going two-stop, whereas some of the others might be able to make a one-stop work? So I think there's loads of really interesting scenarios to play out this afternoon.
Yeah, it's going to be really
Interesting.
and we said earlier there's plenty to play for, plenty to race for, and I just can't wait for this one too, because this season has been. And I got to ask you about the season. After the French Grand Prix of Paul Ricard, Twitter was like, "Oh my gosh, Formula One is a debacle. It's horrible. Every race is boring." And then pretty much to a race since then, it's been great. What do you think?
Yeah. It has. I totally agree. I think, it couldn't have come at a better time because everybody was talking in such negative terms. But it's been brilliant. I think it's partly as a result of these kind of regulations staying relatively stable and power units becoming closer and closer. So the performance is genuinely closer and closer. I think Pirelli have changed their philosophy and started to bring slightly harder tyre selections, which have allowed the drivers to push much more during each stint rather than manage tyres too much. But yeah, we've had some brilliant races. I think Formula One's in an incredibly healthy space right now in terms of the on-track action. I think there's still room for improvement, and I think 2021 might go some way to improving some of the things that do need addressing. But I don't think we've got too much to be complaining about right now in Formula One.
Well, it's funny when I don't know if you heard, but we got to interview Chase Carey when he was here in Austin, and I asked him that question, and I said, "Hey, the racing's been really good of late," but he immediately said, "Yes, but it's not where we want it to be." And I do like that because, yeah, as good as the racing has been, we still know when we turn on the television on the weekend, it's probably going to be one of the big three that win the race. The chances are so crazy strong. And he was very, very sensitive to that and saying that we want to have the occasional underdog battling for a win in a race. And I think we really do need that. I mean, some of the IndyCar is a great example here in the United States. I mean, you don't know who's going to win. There is no guarantee at all of who's going to win the race.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly the point. That's where we do need to improve because we've got some great battles going on, but we kind of know where the winner's going to come from. It's definitely going to come from the top three teams. There's not really any chance for anybody outside of that to have any success. So that's one of the things that 2021 is going to try and address, and let's hope they have some success with it.
Well, we're almost out of time, and one of the things that we like, I know I could do this for another couple of hours, but...
do we have to watch the race? We got Mark here.
Well, one thing we always do is we always pick our predictions, and we pick who we think's going to win, head and heart. In other words, who we think's going to win, who we want to win. What about you today, Mark?
I would love to see Verstappen win. That's who I think I would. I think it'd be great for him and for Honda to get another result like that. I kind of feel like Vettel could be the one today, though. I think they've got a good package, and if they can manage to make their tyres last over the course of this Grand Prix, then I think we could see Vettel, if he can get a great start as well, be able to control the race, and he could come through. Yeah,
that's pretty hard to argue with that. I think you're right. I'd love to see Verstappen win, and any of the young guys. We've been watching Leclerc and gosh, Lando Norris. Has he been fun to watch this year? He's just
great.
Yeah. Well, Marc Priestley, we want to thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, and make sure you check out Mark on Twitter and Instagram and everywhere else. It's
his
Marc
book,
Priestley. Yeah, his
The
book.
Mechanic,
That's right.
Secret World of F1 Pit Lane. We'll put that out for a link to go find that. It's got to be full of stories like we've already heard today.
Yeah, that's right. Mark, thank you. Thank you so much. Enjoy the race today.
My pleasure, guys. Speak soon.
All righty.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye-bye.
All right, we got about a
That's
minute.
as close as we can take you into the garage.
Oh man, no kidding. Yeah, he's a man. But I just love the fact that he's just a gearhead, just like us. I mean, he just wants to know about the technology and really that's what we talked about with Chase Carey and everybody about these rules, that we want this sport. We don't want to turn it into another race series. As much as I love IndyCar and any other, I want Formula One to stay Formula One.
Exactly. And I think, that's a lot of it. How do you do this without restraining the creativity that we depend on Formula One for?
Yeah. All right. Well, what about your predictions, Les? We got less than a
Actually,
minute.
very close, going with Sebastian Vettel on it. And to win, Hart goes with Max.
Yeah, that's hard to argue with. The only other one that I could possibly think of is somehow to see Charles Leclerc. Where is he starting? 14th?
He's,
14th.
Argentina, I think.
Yeah. No, that's Carlos Sainz.
Oh, there.
I'd like to see Charles Leclerc come back and win it, but I think that my head says the same thing, Sebastian Vettel. All right, well, we are done with the pre-race show. We're about to have the race here on SiriusXM with the BBC, but don't forget, we have the post-race show after the race, and we want you to call us up during the show, 512-643-LIVE. Write that down, 512-643-5483, and tell us what you think of the race. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you in a couple hours.